Hi there. Uh, there's been a lot of videos circulating the internet right now about layoff stories, and I thought it would be fun as sort of a personal vlog for future reference, but also as a way to give a different version of a layoff story. A lot of the ones that have been coming into my feed have been software engineering based layoffs at the bigger companies, and mine was a little bit different. I actually worked as a more kind of a hardware engineer, I was a field applications engineer, and I didn't have a straightforward path through life. So I thought maybe other people would relate to it. You could learn a few lessons, like I did, certainly did, or even if it's just entertaining to hear another perspective, as it's not just people at the software companies getting laid off. So, starting into my background a little bit, I graduated high school in a very rural city. I had no real aspirations of going to college when I graduated. I just kind of did floundered around a bit. I worked at a janitorial company for way too long and kind of just played video games, didn't really push myself. I was kind of you'd call it like the underachiever or whatever you want to say. I was typically good at math and that kind of stuff in high school, but I never really pushed myself. I was always just trying to find ways to slack off. And about 4 years after high school ended, I thought, well, I'm kind of tired of being a janitor. I don't feel like there's any job growth here, and really, I'd like to push myself for once in my life. And so I was able to get into the community college, and even though I had not good grades in high school at all, did very good in college. Um, they made me get my high school transcript when I went to the state university, and you could just see the stark difference of my like 2 point low 2 point GPA for high school, and I had I think like a 3.8 when I transferred, but just was super proud of myself. It's not I was the first person in my family to graduate with a bachelor's degree. So it was not common at all. Most of my family are blue collar workers. It was definitely a fun time. My last year, well, 4 terms of college were during COVID, and so they were all remote. I had one class that every other week I was able to do an in-person lab for power electronics, but other than that, it was all virtual, and it kind of took away from the experience. It made it hard to get any internships lined up or more networking since you're all siloed at your house. But in retrospect, I am glad the end of my schooling was during COVID and not the beginning of my career, because the beginning of your career having that I feel like would be worse. I would really want to network and get to know people. Uh, and so yeah, it is not a fun thing for anyone, but it ended up working out. So having no internships, just having janitorial, like recycling truck driver, manual labor jobs, was able to get me through a family contact job for it was around 6 or 7 months at a local engineering place that did more like high level engineering, like industrial for like processing like big chemical plants and stuff. I was not a big fan of it. I knew pretty early on that it wasn't gonna be what I wanted to do long term. I was more driven to like do hands-on things. I really liked circuits. I was really drawn to the analog side, but even some of the digital stuff's cool to me. So I thought, I got an electrical and computer engineering degree. I want to use my degree. Let me go try and do something in circuits. So while I was working there, I applied for other places, and I was able to get a position at a big semiconductor manufacturer, and it was for a job called a field applications engineer. So I interview, I get on, I pass, and I move across the country and start up my new life working as a field applications engineer. So what was kind of appealing about the job was it promised sort of like cross training. It was specifically hired for new college graduates, recent college graduates, and I thought this is great. They have like a whole curriculum laid out. I get a chance to like build my skills, dabble in a few areas, see what I like the most, and also I get to actually figure out what a field applications engineer does because all the listings are very vague, and it really does matter from company to company what your responsibilities are. But essentially, if you don't know what a field applications engineer or an FAE is I'll explain it. An applications engineer first is a technical role for any company where you walk clients through how to use software, how to use a piece of hardware, a piece of machinery, like whatever your company makes, you're the technical support interfacing with like customers. And you typically, if you're an applications engineer, you're only interfacing with engineers or other technical people in your role. As a field applications engineer, you have that same technical support for your customers, but your job is a lot more sales oriented. So my job was to have customers, and I would be on site giving them support if they needed it. I'd be helping them troubleshoot circuits, figuring out which of our devices to pick. But that was honestly all like secondary to driving revenue growth. So that it's a little confusing because you have to be technical, but you only need so much technical expertise till you can actually just work on the main thing of selling. But I didn't understand that at first. When I first started up, it was really fun to just get a move to a new state and get a meet a lot of new people, and the whole experience was just mind blowing for someone like me. And so I kept pushing for like technical projects. That's what I was really interested in. I kept helping people out with like simulations or whatever they needed. And I wasn't that great at like the sales metrics, but I felt like, okay, I feel like those will come around. It wasn't really tied to anything. You sort of just help around. So I was like, oh, maybe it'll get easier when I actually have an assigned customer, when I like actually get through this training. So I get through my sales training, and then I go to a systems engineer training, and I really loved it. It was a more technical cross training, and that's where I found a job that I really liked. And I was able to do testing. I was able to do some like high level like conceptual and like would these systems work. I was able to do like some pretty technical diagrams. It was fun, and I really enjoyed it. And I knew even before I left, like, oh yeah, this is what I'm gonna want to do eventually. And so much to the point where I actually, when I got done with my training and I got my manager for my like full time position, I told him, I think within the first couple months, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna want to go back here. And I set a timeline of like 2 years, just to be like, to get my experience here. But I would, when there's a spot open, I would like to get back into that role, which he was cool with. So we're at the end of my training. It was a whole year, and now I'm a full-time field applications engineer. And so, as a field applications engineer at my company, you were paired with a sales representative that was technical, but not necessarily an engineer. And they were more work driving, like logistics and the sales stuff, but you also still had to collaborate with them. And as I found out in my role, during my training, when I was really pushing for technical stuff, the reason I was able to get so much technical stuff was because a field application engineer is not really graded on what you do technically. You're almost all my metrics were revenue based, relationship building based, information ship gathering based, that kind of stuff. So when I got into my role, my full-time role, it was kind of like a shock because what I thought it was going to be was not what it was. I had kind of shielded myself from the sales stuff during my training, and as a consequence, I got a rude awakening as I had been assigned a customer base, and they were not super happy to discuss with me their technical problems because, of course, that's IP. Even though we have an NDA or whatever, they still only want to give you as much, barely as much as you need to help with their designs. They don't want to give you everything. And so I just kind of found myself trying really hard to build relationships, but I was not good at it. I felt like kind of disconnected from it. I was getting very confused, and it really only took like 3 or 4 months after I got into my full-time role that I started to get depressed, and I started to kind of not do good at work. I started to lose motivation in my personal life. I fell off going to the gym before that for years. I'd been pretty regular gym goer, going like 3 to 4 times a week for strength training and doing stuff. And I could kind of feel my life just slipping. And I'll go over a list of like lessons learned later, but when I had started, I sort of told myself, my job, even though it's mostly sales, I want to make it technical. I want to be, a technical support. I want to be true to my guns. And that was a mistake. You shouldn't try and make a role something it's not. The role was a sales role. And I should have been honest with that and not tried to make it into a more technical role because it was very awkward for everyone. Uh, and so I experienced burnout for well over a year. I was just like going through cycles of depression, burnout. And what I mean by burnout is I had worked many hours, long hours, hard hours, like in my past, doing like these janitorials for like events. You'd work crazy hours with shifting schedules, and you'd work long hours. I don't know how many thousands of toilets I've scrubbed, and just a lot of things that were a lot more demanding, like physically and time wise, than what I was doing at my job. But what I was doing at my FAE job, I felt like I was getting no value out of it. I wasn't helping anyone. There was no noticeable progress. Whereas if I'm unloading a recycling like shed at work, I can see the recycling go trip by trip. Okay, it's getting less and less and less. It always just felt like there was more to do in my FAA role. It felt like I wasn't making as much progress. I didn't know what kind of the guidelines were. It's like, well, there's always more people to talk to. It felt just overwhelming. And because I wasn't progressing as fast as I should have, I was able to work less and less every week. So at first, I'm putting in like 40, 50 hours a week, just trying to reach out, get interactions, get more stuff flowing. And after, a few months, I'm not getting any interactions. And it feels like, okay, I'm not doing anything. Then maybe the next week I only work 35 hours. And then a little bit later, I only work 30 hours a week. Just because really just am depressed and it hurts to even try. And I kind of put myself in a tough spot where, because, which was partly my fault for my sales inexperience, but also partly the role's fault for it saw growth in an area that actually was stagnating for a long time. So the role was expected to have a lot of growth kind of built into it, but that's not how the market ended up working, as things predictions usually work. And so I was kind of twiddling my thumbs, trying to do what I could. I didn't know how to explain what was going on to my manager because I felt like I didn't know what was going on. And I had just started living in constant fear that I was going to get put on PIP. And what PIP stands for is Performance Improvement Plan, where your manager kind of formally tells you you're not up to snuff. We need to get you up to standards, and they set forth a very regimented and well documented like plan for you to improve to the level that they want you at. Which I think for most companies is pretty aggressive, and I don't want to say all the time, but at least some of the time, a PIP is just sort of the first formal way of saying, yeah, you should start looking for new work. Because once you're on the list, it can be very hard to get off the list. Um, But all this to say, I was kind of have floundering in the sales role, trying to do what I could technically. I was still talking with the systems engineer team, uh, and I kept asking when positions were opening up. I was kept, asking about it. Really, nothing was opening up that I could apply for until about a year and a half into my deployed role, where a spot came up that I could actually apply for, and I was so excited. And so I thought, okay, this could be it. This could be what I really need. I was so excited and so happy, and I did 2 rounds of interviews, went good. Did a third round interview that was the technical, and I ended up failing the technical and not getting the position. So at that point, I'm already burnt out from the sales. I just been told I didn't pass the technical on the technical role I wanted, and so I'm very depressed. I This was around August, maybe July of this 2025, and I was thinking to myself, I need to get out of this role. I'd been with the company through 3 years in the actual out of training for 2 years, and I was just coming to terms it probably wasn't gonna work out. So I was thinking by the end of the year I'd be have been applying for like maybe a test engineer, something more technical, just get me in a different spot to like let me breathe. It didn't even have to be a job I wanted to do long term. But uh, that was sort of sidestepped as in September, I was hit with a layoff. It was very unexpected. Uh, some people in the office had heard rumblings. Some people in other countries had gotten a heads up that it was going to happen. But as for me, I knew nothing about it before it happened. So how it happened in my experience was it was a Thursday. I was working from home, uh, which was allowed, but also the a water main broke in my office that day, and that's a pretty easy call to work from home if you don't have running water at your office. And so I was working from home that morning. I had some tasks I was working through, and I saw around 9:15 in the morning, I saw a meeting get put on my calendar from my boss's boss. And I thought, oh, that looks strange. The wording was a bit off. Uh, and it said, oh, don't worry about coming in the office, the whole water thing. I'll just call your phone. And so it was a big red flag. Sent a shiver down my spine, but I'd kind of convinced myself that, this might actually be a legit call. We do here, it was, think we're like 3 weeks from every 6 months, we have like like a report out for revenue and future revenue with the office. And I thought, okay, maybe there's something he's really interested in that I'm covering. I do have some things that are kind of starting to work out. So maybe he just wants to like put something in front of me and be like, hey, I want a good update during our 6 month report on this. And so I kind of convinced myself that it was not what I thought it was. And so I had to go for a walk still to calm my nerves. But around 11, I think it was around 11:30 was the meeting he had put on there. So he gave me about a 2 hour notice. And I joined the meeting, or I pick up the phone, and there's a little slight pause. And then it was, hey, I'm on the line with so and so from HR, and I'd just like to inform you that this is your last day working at blank company. HR is gonna go over all your benefits and what you can expect, and then kicked it over to HR. And they're like, yeah, you're gonna lose access to your laptop immediately, and your all your work stuff. And when they're talking, I was like not even really listening. It just was. I thought maybe this was weird, but I didn't think this was gonna happen. I thought maybe a PIP was coming, but to just get laid off like that, and I was at home, so I was just in a whirlwind. I was like crying. I just didn't know what was going on, and I don't wish that on anyone. It's such a hit to your self esteem, and makes you feel like, wow, I could have got no warning. I also moved across the country for this job. Uh, and so I had, when it happened, I had a fiance, and luckily her family's close by, but my family's, a 40-hour drive away from me, and all the people I grew up with. So it was very jarring and unnerving, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? Um, while I was very scared, I was also. It only took me like 30 minutes after it happened to get very hopeful, because I had been very sad in the role, and I thought, you know what, this is God telling me you've done it again. You stayed in a role just like you did after high school. You stayed in a role for too long that you knew you didn't like, and they kind of got my hand forced in looking for new work. And so I thought, well, I didn't want to be a sales guy anymore. I'd said the whole time I worked there I would never take another FAE job. Of course, after I get laid off, your perspective changes a little. Uh, and I would go for any job, but I was really gunning for a more technical role, like a design role or a test engineer role, something. And so I thought, I'm on a timer with a severance pay. Let me just get out there and see what's out there. And this happened on a Thursday. I took through Monday off. And so Monday, I was like updating my resume, starting to apply, getting stuff rolling. And in this kind of current job market, it can be very hard to get any sort of traction. um, I was not getting any really responses on my LinkedIn like applications. The company that had just laid me off gave me access to a third party company that helps get you a new job. They sort of like work you through working on your resume and stuff. I did not find them very helpful. And they really just kind of pushed this AI editor for a lot of stuff. I felt like a lot of the jobs really expected a very fake AI like presentation. I didn't like it. Nothing felt like it had personality. I didn't know how to differentiate myself. I also felt like I didn't have enough experience in my sales role that was technical to where I could like really go for a more experienced technical role, because I had been in the role a little over 3 years. uh, so I'm still like an early, maybe starting to be mid career engineer. But in terms of technical expertise, I felt like I was below that. I had been doing side projects. I'd built a couple PCBs on my own. I still have textbooks, and I'm still reading in my free time to like update my skills and stuff. So I felt like what I have a home lab. I was doing what I was doing, taking steps to kit myself out more technically. Now, it's very hard to do that when you're in a job that you really don't like and your motivation's just crumbling, and some days it's hard to get out of bed. So I definitely didn't do as much as I could have, but in the circumstances, I was still trying. Um, so the job market, if you're looking for a job right now after a layoff, I really feel for you. Um, I was very lucky. One morning I woke up. I'm typically like go to bed early, like 9 or 10, and I wake up and there are two people that have direct messaged me asking if I'd be interested in an interview, the same morning, which is just blew my mind. I was like, oh, huh, I didn't know this could happen. I didn't know it was a hot commodity. And so I looked at the two positions, and I was just beyond excited. So it was almost like looking back, a test. So one was a sales job, much like the one I just got laid off of, and one was a design role. And I thought, at this point, I might go work at the grocery store. Like if I don't get a job by the end of my severance, I just need a job. So I was gonna apply to anything that wanted me to do an interview, and so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll apply to both. But I was really leaning towards this design job, and so I'd done the first round of the design, which was the technical interview, and I thought I wasn't gonna do well. I ended up doing pretty well. I felt like it was 2 hours long. and I felt like I was sweating after it. But there was a lot of questions, and I actually felt confident. Not everything I answered like super elegantly or had a lot of information, but I felt like I did enough to impress them. And they kind of gave me a hint like, yeah, you'll probably get a call back. And so I felt awesome. And then I had the first round interview, which I did actually all the interviews for the sales role in one day. And during the last round interview, I the VP of sales that I was talking to, he could kind of see through that I wasn't super interested, and he kind of called me out, which great on him. But he was like, it kind of seems like based on your resume and talking, you're a lot more interested in technical things. Would you be okay in a sales job? Would you get bored? And I said, oh, I'm still on the fence. This job would have more like what would you call it? Like freedom. I wouldn't have an office. I would just work from home. They were kind of lies. I was really just wanting to keep all my options open. And so shortly after the interview ended for the sales job, I got a text from the person that originally reached out, and he said, hey, we're not going to go forward with this sales role we're offering you. We don't think you're a good fit. But we do think if you would like to interview for a technical, like design position at a company, if you're willing to relocate to our headquarters, that could be discussion. So feel free to reach out for that, which I was super grateful for. It's like, oh, this is awesome. Uh, I will might pursue this if this other thing I'm interviewing for doesn't work out. So I just said my pleasantries. And so I was really just, well, I was working on this design role interview. It was a longer process because I had to get interviews with specific people and they were traveling. And so it took about a month to get through the whole interview process, like rounds of interviews. And then even after that, it took a month to really hear what was going on. Like, am I going to get the offer? What's going on? Uh, and in the meantime, I'm still applying for places. I'm still just very frightened that, oh, I made a big mistake. I moved across the country, and now I'm gonna have to try and figure out how to support me and my was fiance. We got married during the layoff. I was able to use that time productively, and we pushed we were able like, okay, we were gonna get married. Let's just do it now, and we were able to do that. And I was just thinking the whole time, like, I gotta provide. I gotta get something going on. Kept applying for spots, and I got one interview out of all the applications I got. I got one interview out of actually applying to someone. And I go in for the interview, and I felt like I completely flopped. They had scheduled an hour. After about 20 minutes, they're like, yeah, no, I don't. There's like they asked after like 20 minutes, like, do you have any questions for us? And I took that as, yeah, they weren't interested. And I reached out after still to see if they had any comments. Uh, they never got back to me. So that was for a more technical spot. I was really worried that I wasn't going to find anything. And eventually, the company I had done the 3 rounds of interviews for did reach out, and they said, we'd like to offer you a role as a design engineer. And it just felt amazing. I felt like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. Um, I truly felt like, had they not reached out, and the only reason they reached out was because they knew me from my last role. They knew what I could do technically, and they kind of knew what kind of person I was. And so I felt like, even though it was like a bad experience overall, there was a lot of good in it. And so I got the role in early December. If I hadn't got that role, I would definitely still be looking for work. I'd probably now have to be working just any job I could get my hands on, and then looking for something that pays more in the side, and it would be a rough life. Um, but I'm just so excited now that I get to actually flex my design skills. I'm not, don't get me wrong, I really enjoy the technical and the hands-on and all that. I'm not the best at it all the time, but it is something I'm drawn to. And so I want to keep pushing that line as far as it'll go. Um, and it feels like there's way more growth for this job than my last one. Uh, so gonna go through some like retrospects, some mistakes. If you found yourself like thinking these or like doing these in your job, maybe this could give you some perspective from what happened to me. Um, if you're consistently in a position that you don't like for an extended period of time, you should just start looking for new work. You should really start applying. I just like rule of thumb, maybe 3 months. If you're doing something for like 3 months and it looks like that's what the job is, you should really just start applying for to other places, having more honest conversations with the people around you. But also, it's probably just for the best. Um, don't tough it out in a role you don't like waiting for when you do. Don't try and force a job to be something it's not. The reason I stayed as an FAE for so long was because I saw had a systems role that I thought I could potentially be a shoe in the future. I just thought, okay, I got to grit my teeth now and get through this, and then I can get to what I actually want. But what ended up happening was I put myself in a bad position because I wasn't getting the technical reps I needed in my current job, and it was draining me a lot. And so don't don't try and hold out for the Goldilocks position. You should really just focus on doing something you can enjoy in the current day. Um, I needed to have a lot more honest conversations with my manager. I kind of just assumed I was the problem for a lot of the sales tasks. I was not confident in my abilities, and if it was like a non-technical topics, I didn't know how to go around it. And so I just kind of shut it all in and thought, okay, maybe I just need to work harder. This is all on me, so I can solve it. Which was not the case. It was definitely a lot of me, a lot of mine experience or lack of ability, but also the position, which the position I had was terminated. Nobody works that position anymore because they saw that there wasn't enough growth there. But they wouldn't have known had I not had more discussions with them. It was definitely a lot of factors going on. If you're working for a company and they require you to make like yearly goals and put them in some sort of documented system and see if you hit them, make those goals attainable. I was really bad at just going with the flow. If somebody would recommend something, I'd say, yeah, sure, let's go for it. Let's shoot for it. We can see if we don't do it, whatever. Those were a lot of goals that they had written in the system, and I was failing them. And it kept showing up on my performance reviews as not doing well because I wasn't hitting my goals. Whereas when somebody should have recommended something, I should have said, hey, actually, let me think about this. Let me run the numbers, see if that's feasible to have that much growth. What would that entail? And actually, like, try and taper it down. Uh, I always just thought, hey, we're trying to make the most money. Why not try and do what we can? But if there's is a ranking system at big companies, and those goals are a way they kind of weed people out. So be careful with those. You do want to grow, but you also, if it's a written goal, you want to be able to say you can smash it. So that was a mistake I made continuously, and I started to get better at it, but it was way too late. Um, Another thing was a lot of my technical expertise was not learned on the job. It was done on my personal time. It was done just me getting interested in things and pursuing them. And so not almost nothing technical was forced upon me in the role. And what I should have been doing was worrying less about my sales job performance and trying to less raise that up and trying to more do stuff on my own time and just not coasting, but doing what was needed at the sales job and trying to put more effort and personal time to do technical stuff to get me out of it. So I felt like that would have been a much better use of my time. uh, because when they give you a job, they expect you to do certain tasks. I had already kind of made it out in my head. I wanted to be technical, and the position I was offered was not able to be super technical because I needed to do a lot more reach outs. The accounts weren't as established. The customers either didn't have things going on. I had a customer that was like a company, and they didn't talk to me a lot. And I was like, well, I don't know how to talk to them. And I looked bad on my reviews that I couldn't get them to talk to me. I couldn't influence their designs. Well, it turns out after like a year or so of covering them, they just disband because they aren't winning anything. And then I look at it and I was like, oh, so no wonder I haven't been good job like influencing their designs the last year. They aren't winning any designs, but I was like, there's so many factors going on, I wouldn't have known. Um, and even though I was not a good salesman, I stayed true to my technical ability, even though trying to make the job more technical kind of screwed me in that job. It did help me land my new role, which was very exciting because they did see what I could do technically, and they kind of saw what kind of person I was. And so it ended up working out in the end, but it very well could have not happened that way. I didn't even, the company I work at now, they weren't actively recruiting. So when they reached out, I was very surprised. I thought, you guys aren't hiring, are you? And so it ended up working out, but just be careful about that, especially in the current economy where there's a lot of layoffs happening and there's a lot of, I think, fake job postings kind of going around. It's sad to see. So just be careful. Uh, Overall, I'm still really happy I took the FAA role. It gave me a lot of new experiences. It gave me a new like drive towards, yeah, technical is what I like. And allowed me to network a lot of people. I still talk with people at the old company. There's no hard feelings against the company. I believe it was a corporate move, and it kind of I think it shook the office. Like people weren't super happy about it, but you know, it's what the economy is today. And also, one of the things that I really leaned on during the time I was laid off, and even before, was really my relationship with God and being able to just know all I have to do is try. All I have to do is put in the best effort, try what I can, and it's not all on me to know whether I make something happen or not. Um, it was a big relief. So when you're interviewing, you can feel like, oh, I didn't get it. If only I would have known this. If only I would have been able to do this before, that would have looked way better on my resume. It's really bad to think like that, I think, because you get in this endless cycle. So just knowing, all right, whatever happens, it's for the best. If I get this job, okay. If I don't, then obviously it wasn't meant for me. It was like very calming to me and helped me get through a lot. So I hope either you found this entertaining. Sorry if I rambled on. Uh, but and maybe if you could just learn a different perspective or some from some of the lessons I've learned, it'll help you out. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, and even though I would not recommend getting laid off, it really did help me in overall, which I know is not the case for most people. So I'm very thankful for how this happened. Thanks for listening.